Today we are going to simplify and multiply rational expressions, which basically means we are going to factor, and then cancel off common factors. So over here on the right, I would like you to write down the rational expression x plus 2, x minus 5 over x minus 5, x plus 3. The stuff in the parentheses are considered to be factors. X plus 2 is a factor. X minus 5 is a factor. X plus 3 is a factor. If it's being multiplied, it is a factor. Things that are being added and subtracted are not factors, but the whole set of parentheses, x plus 2, is a factor. So do you see a factor in the numerator that matches a factor in the denominator? X minus 5 matches x minus 5, so we can cancel those. And this gives us the simplified expression x plus 2 over x plus 3. Now, I write my answer with parentheses because if you don't write it with parentheses, it's not wrong, but if you don't write it with parentheses, it's really easy to make a huge mathematical error. X on the top does not match up with x on the bottom. They are not factors. You can't cancel the x's in this expression because x is not being multiplied, x is being added. This is called an addend, not a factor. If it's being added or subtracted, it's called an addend or a subtrahend, and you can't cancel addends or subtrahends. Another teacher refers to this as amputation. This is like a body. And if you cancel out these x's, you're amputating, you're cutting off part of its limb, and then you just have a bloody mess, and you don't want that. So to prevent yourself from making that potential error, leave the factors in their parentheses, and then you won't be tempted to sever the limb from the rest of the parentheses. Okay, number 1. We basically need to make number 1 look like this example that I just gave you. So we need to factor anything that we can possibly factor. So the numerator, x squared minus 4x minus 12. We are looking for two numbers that multiply to give us negative 12 and add to give us negative 4. Normally, when we're talking about multiplying to get 12, I think of 3 and 4 first, but I don't think 3 and 4 would add up to negative 4. So it's probably 2 and 6. The 6 would need to be negative. On the bottom, do you remember how to factor x squared minus 4? Okay, in the denominator, we need to factor x squared minus 4. If there's a little blip in the video, sorry, we had to truncate because my grades popped up on the screen, and that's, bad. How do we factor x squared minus 4? It factors into x plus 2, x minus 2. If you forgot about that difference of two squares, here's a great way to think about it that I think will make a lot more sense to you. This is the same as x squared plus 0x minus 4. So you're looking for two numbers that multiply to give you negative 4 and add up to 0. The only way that you can add up to 0 is if you have the same number, one of them positive, one of them negative. So what number times itself is 4? 2. So x plus 2, x minus 2. All right, once we have the top factored and the bottom factored, do you see any factors on the top that match any factors on the bottom? X plus 2 cancels out x plus 2, so our final answer is x minus 6 over x minus 2. That's it. I would like you to try number 2 on your own. Once you get the numerator and the denominator factored, do you see any factors that cancel? X plus 1's cancel, so our final answer is x minus 6 over x minus 1. Number 3, if we started number 3 the same way we started 1 and 2, we would try to factor the top. So we're looking for two numbers that multiply to give us negative 4 and add up to 10. The only way that you can multiply to get 4 is 1 times 4 or 2 times 2. Would either of those ever add up to 10? No, so notice this is not factorable. Of course, something pops up right where I'm trying to write. Okay, now the reason that we included this example in the notes, I want you to see how you might be tempted to do something that is mathematically incorrect. X squared and 10x are not factors. And I want you to write that in your notes. You can't cross off the x squareds and cross off the 10x's because they aren't factors. They are addends. They are being added to something. They are not being multiplied. Factors are multiplied, and you can only cancel factors. So this one would be considered already simplified. Oh, there's a solution. It's just we can't write this any simpler than it already is. Number 1 and number 2, by factoring and canceling, we can write a simpler expression than what we started with. Number 3, there's no way to simplify it further than what it already is. Number 4, we are multiplying a rational monomial to another rational monomial. Your strategy is going to be multiply everything on the top together, everything on the bottom together, and then simplify. So on the top, what is 5 times 6? 30. X squared times x to the third. That is x to the fifth. And y to the first times y squared is y to the third. So remember, when you're multiplying, you add those exponents together. On the bottom, 2 times 10 is 20. There's just an x, and I'm going to write x to the first to help us out, and y to the fourth. Okay, treat this piece by piece. The fraction 30 over 20. How do we simplify the fraction 30 over 20? 3 over 2. Next, x to the fifth over x to the first. There is one factor of x in the bottom. There are 5 factors of x on the top. So this one factor on the bottom is going to cancel out one of these from the top, leaving how many left on the top? 4. So we will have x to the fourth on the top. For the y's, the smaller number is on the top. So these 3 on the top are going to cancel out 3 of the 4 on the bottom, leaving us with how many on the bottom? Just 1. Our answer is 3x to the fourth over 2y. Try number 5 on your own. If you simplify 108 over 81 in your calculator, you end up with 4/3. X squared on the bottom is going to cancel out 2 of the x's from the top, leaving you with x to the fifth left on the top. Y to the sixth on the top is going to cancel out 6 of the 8 y's on the bottom, leaving you with y squared left in the bottom. Number 6 is actually just like number 1, except now we have 2 fractions. But the important thing to know is the numerator on the left and the numerator on the right are both in the numerator. The denominator on the left, the denominator on the right, they're both the denominator. So your goal is going to be factor, 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 factor. Factor everything that you can possibly factor. A hint for this first one, do you see how the x squared term is second? And we're used to seeing the x squared term first. So I'm going to rewrite that one as negative 4x squared plus 4x. And then we're going to factor that expression. So you want to rewrite it with your x squared term first, because every time that we factor, we want that largest exponent to be first. Now, this isn't a 3-termed thing. We can't factor this into 2 sets of parentheses. We need to factor using greatest common factor. What do these things have in common? To factor this, they do have 4x in common, but we're also going to factor out a negative because I don't want the x squared term to be negative. You don't want a negative on that first term, so we're going to pull that negative out. So we are factoring out negative 4x. That means we're taking each of these terms and it's kind of like we're dividing them by negative 4x. So if we even wrote divided by negative 4x, divided by negative 4x. So our first term, we're taking the negative out, we're taking the 4 out, and we're taking out one of the x's. What's going to be left when we take all of that out? Just an x. 4x divided by negative 4x is going to be minus 1. When you factor using GCF, greatest common factor, you can always redistribute to check yourself to make sure that you did this correctly. So, negative 4x times x is negative 4x squared. Negative 4x times negative 1 is positive 4x. We're good. So our first numerator is negative 4x times x minus 1. Our next numerator, I'm going to do in green, x squared plus x minus 6. How do we factor that? It would be 2 and 3. To make it a positive x in the middle, the 3 would need to be positive, the 2 would need to be negative. Next, I factor my first denominator. Remember, we're looking for two numbers that multiply to give us the last number, negative 3, and add to give us that middle number 2. The only way to multiply to get 3 is to multiply 1 times 3. So I know my numbers are going to be 1 and 3. Think about, would positive 1 plus 3 give us 2, or which one needs to be negative? The 1 needs to be negative. Okay, our last denominator. Is there any way to factor 4x? No, just leave it as 4x. Once you have everything factored, you're now looking for common factors that match on the top and the bottom. And it doesn't matter where it is on the top. Anything that's blue or green that matches up with anything that's purple or gray can be canceled. So, what's one thing that can be canceled? The x minus 1, x plus 3. Can the 4x be canceled? The 4x can be canceled, the negative can't. So I'm going to cross out the 4x, but then circle that negative. The negative doesn't cancel, but the 4x does. You can think of this as negative 1 times 4x. So the negative 1 is still there, the 4x can cancel out. So what's left? We have negative on the top, and we have x minus 2 left on the top. And that is definitely simpler than what we started with. We skipped number 7. If you want to know why, ask me. Number 8 is very, very similar to number 6, except that it's not two fractions. And the way to fix this is to put it over 1. And now we have two fractions. So, x minus 3 in the first numerator. Is there anything else in this numerator besides x minus 3? No. So that first numerator is x minus 3. You can put parentheses around the entire numerator, and that becomes a fraction, or that becomes a factor. So x minus 3, it's like it's 1 times x minus 3. So that's your factor for that first numerator. Our second numerator, we need to factor x squared. Oh my goodness. Factor this. What numbers multiply to give you 1? 1. So this has to be x and 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. So x squared plus 2x plus 1 factors into x plus 1, x plus 1. Our first denominator. What do negative x to the third and 3x squared have in common? Negative x squared. You want to factor the negative out whenever possible. If you divide negative x to the third by negative x squared, you're left with just an x. 3x squared divided by negative x squared would be negative 3. And our last denominator is just a 1. So, what cancels? The only thing that cancels is x minus 3, which is a little bit unfortunate. For our final answer, do you see how the green x plus 1s are both exactly the same? If the factors are exactly the same, it's x plus 1 squared. X squared is on the bottom, and we're going to move the negative to the top.